Hi, everyone. I'm David Greenberg, and I'm the founder and managing director of the Freedom Studio. And I'm about to jump on here on the Prosperity Show with Prosper. We're going to kind of talk about my own journey from a lot of struggles, a lot of suffering, not knowing how things work, and kept banging my head against the wall, so to speak, to finally figuring out how to unlock, freedom, prosperity, abundance, and ultimately to step into my own greatness. And now, through the Freedom Studio, what we're doing is we're helping you and others be great too. So I'm just passing along everything I've learned. We go really deep, and I hope you guys are going to enjoy this conversation.
Now, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga. And if you're tuning in today, I think you're here because just like me, you're hungry for solutions to the problems that keep you up at night. And most of these problems could be or are a lack of freedom, lack of system, and maybe systems that feel rigged, or strategies that really work, but maybe you haven't heard about them. And I think this is the right place for you to be at today, because this is the #1 show to get all exclusive insights into real methods, breakthroughs, ideas, and also the behind the scenes of how change makers are actually doing it. And speaking of change makers, today I have the privilege of welcoming David Owen Greenberg, the managing and education director of the Freedom Studio. Now, David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Prosper, and I really appreciate the invitation. It's great to be here with you.
Absolutely. Well, the pleasure is all mine. But before we get started and dive right into this, you might just have a few things you want to say, to our audience before, we dive into this.
Sure. Well, obviously, it's probably going to be a lot of people here who don't know who I am. So, as you mentioned, my name is David Greenberg. I'm the founder and managing director of the Freedom Studio. We're a private education organization, and really our mission, we just have one mission in life: to help you be great, to help our members be great. And I've kind of taken everything I've learned in 55 years of life and put it into one platform, one organization, and it's pretty much all I live and breathe. So I know we only have limited time today, and I respect that, but it's such a passion for me. I could probably talk about it endlessly. So I am looking forward to what we're going to get into today.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that, David. But also to let our audience know that the information they're going to receive today.
Yeah, I mean, we can really take this anywhere you want, but the Freedom Studio, we focus on three things. We focus on natural law, we focus on equity, and we focus on private trusts. And so we're providing a very practical and hands-on framework. In other words, it's not just philosophical. I like that you said earlier, solutions-oriented. So the way I like to think about what we do is it is solutions-oriented. In other words, I want to convey practical knowledge to people so they can see real results in their life. And of course, the main result is to generate more freedom so that we can be great, so that we can pursue our life's mission and purpose, which I think is really the real reason we're here. And, you have a mission, obviously, I have a mission, but I think everybody does. And I've kind of dedicated my life to helping people figure out how to unlock that. And so I feel like what we teach can really help a lot of people do that.
Absolutely. And obviously you are going to move in with the assumption that the people listening to this will make their own decisions. Is there something that you need to let us know before we get started?
Yeah, so it's probably good to make some, standard disclaimers. So despite what it may sound like to some people, I'm not an attorney at law. I'm not licensed as an attorney. So nothing I'm going to share today may be construed as legal advice. I'm simply going to be sharing my experiences, what I've learned, nor is it any kind of financial or medical advice for that matter. And of course, everything we're going to discuss, I'm just sharing with you ideas. Neither you nor I are going to take any responsibility for what the results people get. They're going to be responsible for their own results.
Fantastic. And thank you so
Yeah.
much for giving us that start, because obviously a lot of people will be looking for solutions, but obviously they have to be adults about it and make their own informed decisions. Now, David, let's get into the fun stuff. Tell us about the life before Freedom Studio. What was life like for you, and who was David before he discovered freedom?
Yeah. So depending on how far you want to go back, I would say that even as a kid, my whole life, basically, I've always known that reality is different than the way it's presented. In other words, the way the world is kind of shown to us is perhaps not the way it really is, or, not the whole story. And I certainly never believed in authority. In fact, let me give a real world example. When I was 11 years old, I really disliked the fact that my parents would say, well, we can give you an allowance, but you've got to do endless chores and you got to basically do what we tell you, to even just get that allowance. That didn't sit very well with me. So this is long before the internet, but I somehow, through these newspapers and magazines that I was subscribed to, through Boy Scouts and others, I found an opportunity to actually earn my own way. So I was 11 years old, and I became a door-to-door salesman at the age of 11. And it was very motivating because I knew that I would earn exactly what I deserved. I would basically be my own boss, kind of basically just being an entrepreneur, I guess, without realizing what that was. And that kind of that kind of demonstrated, even at the age of 11, that I was already thinking that way. Like, we need to really be the masters of our own path.
I like that.
So, yeah.
I like that a lot, because it really sets the tone of the person that you later on become. I mean, scouts, that's a lot of living outdoors and with the motto, be prepared all the time. So that really opens you up to a whole different world than a world of gaming and things of that nature. But you did say the sort of realization came from not accepting what the parents were sort of giving at that particular time. Let's just maybe have, a picture of what did the parents do? What sort of roles were they involved in society that, obviously would have created that scenario for you in the house?
Yeah, well, I think my parents were probably not different from many other parents, because you have to remember, Prosper, this kind of, the way people raise their children, it's just kind of passed on from generation to generation. So they probably learn certain things from their parents, and most people are probably operating that way. But I think it was just my natural aversion to it that stood out to me. Like, it just didn't sit right with me. It seemed like a form of tyranny. And my parents didn't stop me from going selling, so I don't think they were trying to, completely stop me from doing my own thing. It's just the way that worked in the house, it wasn't going to fly. I just had like a natural feeling like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to go and do this. I'm going to go do my own thing.
Now, David, were there other siblings in this household as well that?
Yeah, two sisters. Yep.
And
two younger sisters.
What was their disposition towards this? Were they the compliant type, or were they also David-esque?
Yeah, I think they were just more go with the flow. I think, there was a lot of tension in our household. Just, there was a lot of family dynamics. My parents got divorced when I was about 14. So you can imagine there was a lot of tension dynamics in the house. But I don't really got a sense that I get a strong sense that my sisters were really, seeking to kind of go that similar path. Maybe they had similar thinking, but we never really talked about that. So it's a good question. I'm not sure. but I didn't see them going out and doing projects like I was, you know, not that there's anything wrong with that. I think they were just kind of on a different path.
Fantastic. Because obviously, when, within a family environment, either siblings are all sort of similar or you're completely different from each other. And obviously,
Yeah.
we've established this was just a David thing. We can now maybe
Yeah.
through and see the other activities that you were then maybe exposed to. Like you did mention the scouts and things of that nature. How often were you involved in extracurricular activities that were not primarily school orientated?
Well, I dabbled in a few things. So the Boy Scouts was a big one, and I did, like you mentioned, I enjoyed the outdoors. I learned to love being outdoors. I learned to love, you know, spending time in nature, even as a kid, and really appreciating that kind of roughing it. And and other activities. I mean, I acted in a few plays, so I did a little bit of acting. That was kind of like the start of my performance career. And in fact, I remember, you know, as a young teen or preteen, I used to get together with some of my other friends and we would like record these comedy tapes. So already back then, I was kind of getting involved in performance and acting, as it were, you know, creativity.
You know what I like about that, David, is when you're an actor, you assume a role, and
Yeah.
there's always a script around the production or the creativity. And obviously, this would have given you an idea that everything is either off of a script or somebody's playing a role.
Yeah, well, I think in life we're always performing to some extent. I mean, personality is kind of like a performance, and we can shape our personalities, you know, as we wish. People can come across. I've molded my personality many times in order to, you know, sometimes I have to be the tough guy. Sometimes I can be a little bit more relaxed. You know, it kind of runs the whole gamut. But yeah, in a way, we're kind of always performing. It's just the difference, I think, is really, are you performing from a place of trying to create authentic authentic expression of who you truly desire to be in the world? Or are you doing it more just to get along because you think it's the right, you know, because you think it, you know, you'll fit in more to society, or whatever that motivation. For me, it was just trying to explore, you know, who I am and expressing myself.
Absolutely. I've heard it being referred to the world is a stage, and some of us are just
Yeah.
actors in it, and there are people that write the script. So I think maybe that would also maybe tie into that creativity, like you're saying. Everyone is assigned some sort of a role. Now, you did mention selling door to door. That's one thing that is very scary, especially for 11-year-old. You're knocking on people's
Yeah.
doors. It's very, very gutsy. Did you ever maybe imagine during that time you'd end up, founding a movement around freedom and sovereignty?
No, no, I didn't have any inkling. For me, it was just enough courage to just get out there and start knocking on strangers' doors. And I remember having to build up courage to do that. It's funny you should mention that. I mean, yeah, I definitely had the motivation, but yeah, when it came to actually knocking on doors, sometimes I had to really muster up some courage just to even knock.
You see, a lot of people never have that foundational lesson of being told no and having to go and open up another door as if it's their very first time doing it for that particular time. And I think that will be apparent in who you later on become. So after you were knocking doors, you obviously went on with life. Was there any work involved or any travel that you would have done that then formed part of your journey?
Yeah, so as far as other work, I mean, I was a newspaper delivery guy. I worked in an office when I was still in high school, just trying to get my feet wet in that environment. I even did some temp work, um, mainly just because I wanted to keep earning my way and wanted to keep learning, not because not out of any kind of desperation. But at that point, I had just gotten used to earning my own money, so it was just natural to continue. As far as travel, my first real travel, I mean, I traveled regionally as a kid, which I enjoyed, but my first real travel was international. And when I was 19, I actually went to Israel, which of course is a real hot spot and, hot topic. But this was in 1989, and I went to Israel because I was raised from a Jewish background, and it's very customary for families to encourage their children to go to Israel. And I was like, all right, I got a full scholarship to a program, to travel all over the country. Everything was paid for. I was kind of adventurous. I was like, I'm not going to turn that down. Let's go see what's going on. I like the idea of traveling halfway around the world. For me, it wasn't, this may be hard for some people to believe, but it wasn't either religiously nor politically motivating for me. It was purely the sense of wanting to discover something new and just seeing an opportunity and seizing it.
Absolutely. And obviously that was age 19. There's times when you actually then also went to Colombia. Was that during the same time or was that later on in life?
No, that was much more recent. That was in 2012. I first went to Colombia. Yeah, 2012. I mean, it's already 13 years ago. The time goes by, but it was a little more recent. Yeah.
So Israel was obviously, background and things of that nature, but what drew you to Colombia?
Yeah, so I was backpacking through Mexico and then Central America, just making my way down. I was kind of a little bit lost at that time. I mean, I was going through a lot of changes, Prosper. I was overcoming addictions. I used to be addicted to pharmaceuticals for about 12 years. And I was just weaning myself off of that. So I was kind of shedding a lot of things in my life, and I started backpacking extensively. And I just slowly made my way through Central America. And as I got closer to Colombia, I just kept hearing more stories like, David, you're going to love Colombia. You got to go visit Colombia. It just kept coming up over and over again. To the point where I was at Colombia, I mean, the expectations were very high. But I have to say, surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, Colombia was far better than even I had thought it would be, despite all the hype. Like it was even more amazing than I thought it was going to be as far as an overall experience.
Absolutely. Now let's maybe backtrack a little bit. You did mention you were addicted to pharmaceuticals. Are you okay to just maybe give us a glimpse into what was actually going on during that time? And,
Sure.
where were you specifically?
Yeah. So when I was in my mid to late 20s, I was constantly stressed out. But I didn't have any basis to know why. Like I didn't understand that there's always going to be a causal factor. So in natural law, we talk about everything is cause and effect. So if you're feeling a certain way, there's going to be a cause, or maybe several. But if you don't really have the framework to dissect that, or just if you haven't been educated, like, okay, I got to figure this out. Like, why am I anxious? Instead, if society says to you, well, you're anxious, so there's something wrong with you, so you need to take drugs to get your mind leveled. And, or, because you had difficulties as a kid, this is just who you are, and you'd be better off with a drug. So I kind of, because I didn't know any other way, I kind of essentially fell for that and, started to believe at some point, I guess, because I was suffering a lot, I didn't really know how to fix it or how to address it. And I didn't really have any mentors who could guide me. It was natural that I was going to fall into, pharmaceuticals, and that's essentially what happened. And of course, these drugs are very seductive because they mask the problem, so they make you feel good. But it's a false good, as I like to call it, because it takes away all your mojo. So you feel relaxed, you don't feel stressed, but you also lose that spunk, you lose that, vivacious life energy that you need to be creative, to be a force in the world. So that's the price you pay. And I just didn't, in the beginning, I didn't really understand that until I got deeper and deeper into it and saw what I was losing. And at some point it just became obvious to me, but it just took that long for for me to put all the pieces together.
Now, David, you have given us information that at age 14, your parents divorced. Could that have been the cause? Like you're talking about cause and effect, as to why you maybe went down that path?
No, that wasn't the sole cause. That was more an effect of other things that were going on, but that itself obviously had a big influence on me. But the cause of that, of course, is my parents were not really, they didn't really marry for the right reasons. They weren't really compatible in the true sense. It was almost like it's just the custom for people to get married when they're in their 20s. People meet at college, they like each other, they're attracted, and society says, well, you got to get married. You got to get married, right? But I don't think there was a lot of deep, I get the sense from when they tell me the stories, there wasn't a lot of deep thought. So, a household is really meant to be the bedrock of a strong society. But when people come together and they don't have a clear vision of what that means to be parents, things can go sideways really quickly. So it did influence me in the sense that I had a lot of cynicism about relationships and probably lost out on many opportunities because of that. So it was probably a causal factor for that. And of course, just lacking, a parental guidance like, hey, David, let me show you the ropes. Here's what it means to be in a relationship. Here's the pros, the cons. Here's the value. No one ever really walked me through that. I kind of had to put that all together myself.
And obviously, the pharmaceuticals were a derivative of you wanting to escape that particular scenario, or where they're actually fixing something.
Yeah, it was me being in pain, like even sometimes physical pain, but having no basis to know how to address it. So think about it. Back then, I didn't know anything about natural law, other than just anything intuitive I might have felt. But I didn't have any internal tap into my internal guidance. I didn't really trust my intuition, and I didn't have any mentors on the outside who could kind of coach me or guide me and say, "Hey, David, it's totally cool if you're feeling anxious. Here's what let's figure out what's going on so we can address it."
Usually when people are in this sort of state, either it's like these health issues, it also leads to financial collapse because somebody has got to pay for these pharmaceuticals, and it would have maybe created a bit of stress in your pots. I mean, or in yourself. Did you feel like you had hit rock bottom, or were you still able to manage?
Yeah, for me, the financial problems weren't because I wasn't earning enough to pay for what I needed. It's because being on those pharmaceuticals and for other reasons, I lacked focus. I wasn't able to really bring the best of me to my work, and I probably didn't take the work seriously enough. And I even remember one time being fired from a job because they said I was too sleepy. I was like falling asleep during meetings, which doesn't surprise me because again, these pharmaceuticals make you sleepy, and you kind of lose that proper focus to stay awake and pay attention to the details. It kind of, makes everything a little bit muddy. So I was always offered great salaries. I mean, I had enough to cover my life expenses. I never really focused. I never really turned it into something.
Now, part of this then led you, as we have established, to go on this trip to Colombia. How did that come about?
Yeah, before I started traveling, and I went first to Mexico before I got to Colombia. That was kind of like my first destination, which was an amazing experience too. I love Mexico. But it's kind of like within a very short period of time, my whole life started to unravel, and I kind of made a conscious decision to let it happen because I felt intuitively that I wasn't living in alignment. There were just signs that came up, small things, people. I would go to a party and someone would just randomly come up and yell at me about you need to be in congruence with yourself. like just someone I wouldn't know. They just come up to me out of the blue. Like, you need to be congruent with yourself. You need to be congruent with yourself. And then like, my car getting smashed when I hit a deer, um, and like deer in the headlights kind of thing, metaphor. And then, two vendors that I hired because I was a business owner back then too, but, two vendors that I tried to hire working together started fighting with each other over political reasons. And, me feeling like, geez, I just wanted us to do some good work together. Why are all these politics coming in? And just realizing that this business that I was trying to create was probably just going to implode anyway. So, all of these things coming together, relationship issues, struggling with relationship issues, deciding that I wanted to get myself off the drugs, but I hadn't fully done that yet. So I was kind of in the process of figuring out how I was going to do that. So these things all kind of came together to a head all at the same time. And then within about 6 months, I was on the road traveling.
What was your first impression of South America?
Well, like I said, I went to Mexico first, but yeah, for South America, I mean, all of Latin America is amazing. It's rough, it's chaotic, but it's very authentic. People are very authentic. You meet people where they're at. Um, I would say if you could describe the character of Latin America, it's got a big heart, especially it's not so cerebral. Like in the States, we're very heady. We're very top heavy. It's a lot of intellect. And there's nothing wrong with the intellect. That's great, but it needs to be in balance. We need to have the right brain, left brain. It's better when things are in balance. Everything flows better. So I think I just felt more at ease in Latin America because I felt like I could express myself. I felt like it's okay to have different emotions. It's okay even to be angry, whatever comes up, and just express that. And I like the authentic expression of people around me, even people I didn't even know very well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as humans, I think we emit some sort of an energy. And like you said, people randomly at a party were just telling you to be congruent because maybe they were feeling that inconsistency in whatever it is that you were doing at that particular time. But you went on and spent 8 years in Colombia. What is it about you immersing yourself in that culture that actually then taught you about freedom, autonomy, or any constraints that, like you said, in the other part of America, it's just a little bit a checkup from the neck up?
Yeah, so I mean, you bring up a good point, Prosper. I mean, when I started traveling, and this was around 2009, there were a lot of things going on, of course, geopolitically. Um, Not necessarily to comment on the events per se, but there's a lot of stuff. There was a lot of stuff going on, and I just became aware. Like I said, I'd always been open to deeper knowledge. I'd always been open. Like I was never someone that was like afraid to explore a new topic or, so-called what people sometimes call conspiracies. It never bothered me. I was always interested. I found out about the Paul is dead conspiracy from the Beatles when I was 19, and I just thought it was the coolest shit ever. I heard about excuse me, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear. I apologize. And I heard about what was the other thing I heard about? So it was the Paul is dead, and then it flew my mind. But there was a few other things that I discovered, and I was like, yeah, this makes a lot more sense than what I've been told. This makes a lot more sense than what they teach me in school. So I was just a natural shoe-in. And what happens is when you're open to that kind of knowledge, it just kind of starts showing up. And then there were other events. I guess we got to be careful what we say if it's on YouTube, but there's all these events going on, and I was like, yeah, I'm not buying this. So part of my motivation for traveling is it just seemed like there was I just stumbled on some really dark stuff going on, and I just wanted to get myself out of that environment. I needed to step back. So that was another motivation. And being in Latin America, I wouldn't say I had my big awakening happened in shifts. So I was still kind of in my own bubble. But one of the things I loved about being in Colombia is because people are so authentic, you learn faster. because you really bump up against people. So whatever I was dealing with, it just kept showing up, faster and faster. So those 8 years, like I went through major transformations. I came out of it a completely different man.
Mm, and I appreciate you for having taken that, because so many people just go through life without having some sort of a pattern break, or they're just within
Yeah.
the same state that they grew up in. And, like you have said, end up marrying the high school sweetheart and nothing really ever changes in their world or perception. But, like you said, you kept bumping into people and things of that nature. Did it also affect you maybe that there are people that actually speak a whole different language than what you thought was, normal in your everyday survival, and they are surviving with or without you?
Well, only in the beginning, but I mastered Spanish very quickly. Like even within 6 months to a year of traveling, I was already pretty good with Spanish. And then of course it just kept improving. And I actually and to this day, continue to enjoy speaking with people in Spanish. Now I've gotten to a point now where it's almost the same as speaking English. I don't feel like any more effort. Obviously I was building up to that, but I mastered the language pretty quickly, and I actually thought it was fun to be able to understand people in a different language because people express themselves differently. The nuance is different, the details are different, the emotions are different. So I kind of dug it. Like to me, Spanish was pretty cool in that regard. I thought like people could really express themselves, in a very dynamic way.
I mean, obviously, considering your brain was open to learning all of these things, and like you say, the events were being presented not in the way that you felt they were being authentically presented. Now you went on and mastered natural law, equity, trust, and status correction, and also private banking. So maybe let's go through each of these, but you explaining to us what each of these mean and why anybody should care.
Yeah, it's a great question. Every time somebody asks me that, I'm always thinking like, what's the best way to explain, like to really open the door, for someone who hasn't even heard these terms before. I should probably also preface this by saying I'm not a religious man, but I'm also not an atheist. So if the viewer or listener can grasp that, that may provide some insight into what I'm about to share. So I'm not religious. I respect religious traditions, and I learn a lot from different traditions and embrace many traditions myself. But I don't consider myself to be of a particular religion in my way of being. You could say I have a personal religion, but I'm also not an atheist in the sense that I know that this universe is not just an accident, like a lifeless, mostly dead and lifeless universe that's basically chaotic except when we bring order to it. Actually, what I've learned is the opposite is true. There's actually very simple rules in place that that explain why things are the way they are, and that's what natural law is. Natural law is a set of very simple rules that just say, hey, when we behave a certain way, here's what happens, or here's why reality appears to be the way that it is. And the only reason why people, I think, are all perplexed is this is not taught in any way, shape, or form in mainstream education, except perhaps as like a very small niche for philosophy, and maybe in the college, university level. But like none of this is taught in any way in elementary school or junior high school or high school. It's probably not taught in most homes. But yeah, I mean, there's an intelligence behind everything in our reality. Everything is alive, and there are very simple rules in place. When I say the word rules, it's not meant to sound like somehow our hands are tied. But yeah, I mean, when we do certain things are going to happen, and that's what I mean by natural law.
And obviously, if people would want to understand, natural law could be things like gravity or electricity, or things that are natural truths. If you could maybe give us a few examples of what that actually means, in terms of you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So what you're referring to are the physical, purely physical laws, and those are definitely part of natural laws. Obviously, gravity is not man-made, so we know that it's a law of nature. But when we talk about natural law, we're mostly talking about what happens in the mental realm. In fact, the first principle of natural law is the all is mind, the universe is mental. In other words, we live in a mental universe. Another way to say the same thing is everything exists in the mind of the one infinite intelligence, what some people call God or the creator, or however you want to describe it, because these are just words to describe it. But some people call it infinite intelligence, the substantial reality behind things. So everything is alive and everything exists in the mind of the creator. And if you think about it, that's why in the coaching world, coaches are always saying, well, it's all about your state of mind. It's all about your state of mind. Well, they're actually right. It is all about your state of mind because everything emanates from the way we think, right? And thought is related to imagination and then willpower. So everything is created through mind. And if you think about it, most of the challenges we have in life are psychological. Relationship issues, conflicts, misunderstandings, negotiation. Everything is mind. Literally, there's no escaping it. So that's the first principle of natural law, that we live in a mental universe.
Is that maybe what they then say the truth will set you free, in as much as if you do understand the natural truths, you literally can be a free person? But the fact that we try and add our 2 cents into what we think or feel things should be is not exactly what it is.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with having your own interpretation or having an opinion or, interpreting things, because we can only really interpret things from our perspective. But yes, it's important to know that there's objective truth that doesn't depend. You can't will the sun to not rise in the morning, no matter how much you try. And so the same thing applies to natural law. You can't claim that there isn't causality or that we don't live in a mental universe, or, you can make as many claims as you want, but ultimately, if you refute natural law, you're just going to keep bumping up against it until you realize that it's true.
And like you've said, most suffering is basically derived from not maybe following these natural laws. How can somebody maybe notice that in their way of life? Or maybe you can give us an example of your past when you were not following these natural laws.
Yeah, we can do both. I would say the highlight is if you seem to have continuous suffering in your life that never seems to abate, it's probably because of a lack of understanding of natural law and how to apply it in your own life in order to find real solutions. So if you feel stuck with no way out, or you feel like you're always the victim, or maybe objectively you are suffering, maybe you're broke or whatever it is, whatever's going on in your life, there's a causality to that. And so but when you don't know that or don't take the time to figure it out, you're just going to keep suffering, because that's the way reality works. It's just going to keep delivering that to you over and over again. That's one of the biggest lessons I had to learn, is any suffering I had was just going to continue until I took ownership of the causal factors and started to make changes in my life, including starting to get to know myself better, figuring out what my weaknesses are, my strengths and weaknesses, and then, modifying my behaviors accordingly. So you asked for an example. Well, the pharmaceuticals coming off of that would be one great example. More recently, I made a lot of changes to the way I eat. Essentially, as of the time we're recording this, the first time ever, I've gone 11 days without eating any carbohydrates, except maybe a little bit of coffee, which is less than a gram per cup. So that's a huge change. But what led to that was I was suffering with some physical issues. It's still kind of healing from that. But I was practically bedridden at one point. And until I started to take responsibility for, okay, how am I causing this? Not being the victim. How am I causing myself to be ill? What are the behaviors that I've either done in the past or I'm currently doing that I would need to modify in order to change that. And then once I started to apply that, like shifts started happening really, really fast.
But as we have understood, and thank you so much for taking us there, as we have understood, by you, depending on the pharmaceuticals, there was so many things that were probably outside of your, causing, so to speak, like you're saying, or your responsibility. Like maybe let's take your parents' divorce, whatever was happening to you at that particular time. You did mention there was a business conflict between, parties that had nothing to do with what you were doing. How would that have been your responsibility?
Well, those events aren't my responsibility. How I respond to them are. And I would have made different choices. So we can't control other people. We can't control external events. What we can control is how we behave in context to everything. So when I look back on those things, I would have just made different choices. If I had been taking better care of myself, then regardless of all the other things going on. I mean, if I had to make certain moves, like including living at my house, some children emancipate themselves, maybe I would have done that. If that could have been something different. I don't know. I mean, it's easy to look back and say, well, what I've done, but I do know I would have made different choices. So we can't control everything around us. That's not the point. However, there's a nuance to that as well. What I have discovered is when you're in alignment, when you're acting in alignment, you tend to draw more positive experiences, and you're going to still draw lessons because we all have lessons to learn, but you're going to learn the lessons very quickly, and it's not going to take you down. You're not going to get taken out by something. It's just, it might just be a temporary blow rather than like something that just drags you on for years. So it's not that you would never have any challenges. It's just you would deal with them in a very different way.
Mm-hmm. David, do you consider yourself free?
Yes, in my mind, and to a large extent. What still keeps me from being completely free is I was for a long time a people pleaser. See, freedom starts in the mind, right? So when you ask someone if they're free, it's are you free in your mind? Do you feel free, or do you still feel held back by something? So what keeps me from being completely free are anything I'm still addicted to, large or small, a tendency to not want to rock the boat, although I've been obviously working on that because I've become a little more controversial, so to speak. Getting over old patterns that tend to keep showing up, like old triggers. So I'd say I'm a lot freer than I used to be. But freedom is a journey, it's not a destination. One of my mentors says over and over again, there is no arrival point on this journey. You're just constantly evolving. So I'm definitely a lot more free than I used to be. But when you say, are you free? Like there is no arrival point. It's just like, are you becoming more free over time, or are you becoming more enslaved? Those are really the only two choices.
Maybe you can walk us through what that actually means, because so many of us are walking around with somehow golden handcuffs, maybe tethered to our phones, tethered to our spouses, homes, or whatever it is that society deems are the trappings of somebody who's civilized or things of that nature. Maybe you can walk us through that a little bit in defining
Yeah.
what freedom actually means.
Yeah. And by the way, I used to be this guy that I'm about to describe. So I don't say these things like I was never there. I was probably in this experience myself. But when I talk to someone and they say, oh, I work at this job because I've got to pay the bills, that's not freedom. Why? Because they're acting out of fear. Why are they acting out of fear? Because they feel they have to do something that if they didn't do it, they wouldn't have what they need in life. So they're operating in fear. So that can never be from freedom. Okay. So freedom is acting from purpose, what your inherent desire is, what you believe that you should be doing, or what your purpose is, and knowing that if you align with that, you're going to get what you need. You're going to get the resources you need, whether it's money, time, people, connections, etc. And you don't have to be afraid. You don't have to work a job just to have what you need. So most people, and I used to be this way, feel they need to work a job because there's really no other choice. and they end up working for years doing something that they either dislike or even hate in some cases. And then they never really build anything. And then they reach the end of that and they're still struggling because now they have all these issues to deal with, and they don't really have the financial abundance or the resources, the prosperity to deal with it. So that's not freedom. Freedom is doing what you're here to do. Okay. Freedom is a means to an end. It's not the end of itself. This is something I like to harp on a lot, because I think people sometimes like, oh, I need to pursue freedom. Well, that's great, but what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with all that freedom? Because freedom it's like a resource, right? When you have more freedom, you can get more done. You can create more. So my question to people is, great, I love that you want to be free. What do you want to do with all that freedom?
Now, with all that you're saying, people go to work, they raise their families, they do what they should in order for society to thrive. If what you're saying is the way to go, why aren't a lot of people doing it?
Well, there could be a couple of different reasons for that. I think, the way society's been run is very ancient, and I'm not even sure how far that goes back. There's disagreements over that, but this is called social engineering. And basically what you do is you implant in society through propaganda, through media, you perpetuate a certain paradigm. Okay. Going to school, you got to do your arithmetic, you got to study, you got to be an obedient student. So this gets cultured over generations. It's not just, one family, one situation, right? So it's like over and over again, and it gets passed down from parents to children, right? That, parents that will say to the kids, you got to get a job, you got to get married, you got to do this, you got. Now, I think it's great. I think having a relationship and raising children is very important. Don't get me wrong. When it's done consciously, intentionally, I mean, it's a pillar it's a solid, rock solid pillar of society that makes society more unbreakable when you have these tight families that are, tight, like true families. But I'm just talking more about the mainstream narrative of, you got to get out there and get married as fast as possible. You got to get a job. You got a 6-figure income. You got to do this, got to do that. You got to get insurance. You got to, this, that, and the other. Well, that's all based on fear and scarcity. But none of that is real because the universe is abundant. Like, we live in an abundant universe. You can, as long as you're willing to be all that you can be and be of value, you're going to get the reciprocal value back. That's the way reality works.
I like that premise, and the whole thing, like you say, is based on natural laws and things of that nature. But I've been to school, been to maybe many webinar. I don't think anybody has spoken about any of those. Why is it such a secret?
Yeah, so this comes into the topic of what's called the occult or the occult sciences. And a lot of people get tripped up on this word because the word occult doesn't mean evil, it just means hidden. It comes from the Latin occultare, which means to hide or conceal, or from the Latin adjective occultus, which means hidden. Ultimately from the Latin oculus, which is eye. So, there is a body of knowledge that's hidden. What I mean by hidden, it's not like it's locked in a little box that you can't get to it. It's just that certain families, certain societies, secret societies, for example, they carefully guard that knowledge and the passing on of that knowledge. And and then to the mainstream and to most people, they deny it exists, or they ridicule people. That's why they created words like conspiracy theory, conspiracy theorist, etc. Because people are afraid to be made fun of, or, people can be easily distracted. So it's always been there the whole time. It's just, it's hidden in the sense that nobody is teaching it and you have to discover it for yourself. But one thing I've learned, Prosper, is when you are ready to discover it, apparently, based on my experience, it will show up for you.
Is that the statement when the student is ready? You know, the teacher will suddenly appear and you'll be like, wait a
Yeah.
minute, there's a whole world of people that were existing with or without my own existence as well. Now, let's say somebody has that moment with this particular video. You know, they're burned out, they're confused, they're lost. What would you suggest be their first move, or maybe any diagnostic step that you can guide them through, because fish don't see the water that they swim in?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, being in a community of people who have kind of a like-minded vibe is going to be valuable. And that's why we emphasize a lot the community. But if someone's looking for like a great starting point, I would just encourage them to go read a book called The Kybalion, Kybalion. It's a very small book, relatively. I think it's about 100 pages, and it's very well written. And it's like a basic treatise into core principles of natural law. And I think for a lot of people, I've heard great feedback. You know, it had a profound impact on me. If someone's just looking for like more of a grounding, okay, just looking for answers, that's a great way to start. And what happens is, as long as you're open to learning, let's say you read that book, you're going to know what to do next. Because the way natural law works, the way our lives unfold is whatever's the next thing they were meant to do, it's just, you know, that's going to appear in our path. The way will be shown. You just have to kind of be tuned into that. So the only thing you really need to start with is just a desire to know yourself, a desire to know the universe, a desire to figure things out, you know, not settling for, you know, I can never know the answers, or you know, I have to give up, you know, so you have to have some semblance of hope, a desire to change things, and belief in yourself, if nothing else, that you can.
So you did mention or allude to like-minded people. You've created a space like that. Could you maybe tell us about the Freedom Studio?
Yeah, so that's a great point. So when I created the Freedom Studio, I wanted to focus on three main things: education as the first, community is the second pillar, and then service is the third. Service, or even you could say commerce, you know, exchange, right? What we call business. So those are essentially the three pillars, and that's why it's so practical, because all of those are very practical. Education is practical, community, and service. But for the community part, one thing that was very important for me, because for many years as I was figuring all this out, like I was sharing with you, I didn't have a community. A lot of people thought I was kind of nuts. I eventually came to just, you know, own that and just be okay with that. But it can get a little bit lonely and frustrating. And also, what if you want to create relationships? What if you want to, you know, build a relationship? It's hard to do that if you can't even find someone who at least can somewhat relate to, you know, where you're coming from. So for all those reasons, not to mention to do business with people who are like-minded, you know, to conduct commerce. So for those reasons, when I created the Freedom Studio, the community aspect was and always is and continues to be one of the most important aspects of it, because I want people to have a place where they can network with each other without restriction, exchange ideas, learn from each other, and even people rise up and become educators themselves and service providers. Like I'm not going to do everything. So we're kind of also fomenting other leaders and educators within our community. So that's a big part of what we do.
I mean, obviously, without mentioning names, because the people you deal with are free and sovereign individuals, do you maybe have a story or a client or a moment where somebody went from despair, didn't quite know what was happening in their life, to a whole dramatic change? Like you say, they now have an understanding of who they are or whose they are via the work that you're doing. My actual question here is, does this work on humans?
Oh, yes, it does. And I've done hundreds and hundreds of consultations, and I've conducted, probably maybe several hundred study sessions. Those are like small group sessions on Zoom. So like more than, a group of people. And I'm constantly hearing people saying, thank you, David. Thank you, Freedom Studio, for helping me. Sometimes it's smaller things, just dealing with issues at home or something that was just, looming over their head. But I just keep hearing feedback from people like, it could be a practical example. It could just be more general in their life. But I'm getting constant feedback. That's how I know that this is working. It's just like a constant stream of feedback. And then within our network, people sometimes post specific posts about, oh, I was able to do this, or I was able to complete a certain process or create a certain outcome. And I just wanted to share that with everyone. And of course, I share everything that I am able to achieve. And so yeah, it's a constant barrage of wins. There's a big feedback loop, and I don't do it just for that reason. I mean, I enjoy all the feedback. I don't do it just for the feedback, but I pay attention to the feedback because that's what gives me the feedback to know that what I'm creating or what I have created is valuable.
Absolutely. Now, indulge me here, David, for a minute. I mean, obviously, you introduced us to a Boy Scout who was knocking on doors, went through stuff in life and ended up in South America for 8 years, on a mission to self-discover themselves. And along the journey, you were learning things that you are now sending down the elevator to other people. Now, if somebody would look at this tale, they would look at maybe the time you were outside of your comfort zone for the 8 years as a time you were going through somewhat of a rite of passage, okay? And what that normally presents is a pattern break in somebody's life. Some people just go from kindergarten, high school, get married, get a job, kids, then whatever, pattern without that sort of a pattern break. Whereas in other cultures, there's a bar mitzvah, there's a quinceanera, there's a time where somebody is told or tapped on the shoulder, you're an adult now, it's your turn to lead. Would you say that what you're doing and bringing to people in the Freedom Studio could be somewhat akin to a rite of passage that people really need in order for them to get back to who they are as a person?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it is kind of an initiation, if you want to, again, to borrow that language from the occult. You're kind of being initiated. And because we focus so heavily on education, I'm encouraging people to go through a certain curriculum so they can build up a foundation and have that possibility where otherwise they might be struggling. And believe me, we deal over and over again with the same 3 to 5 foundational points for everyone because most people are struggling with the same things. So you're absolutely right. Like my goal is, the way I look at it is, if I want to help somebody be great, we got to start with a solid foundation. And usually that's certain things they need to learn. And there's some self-work because it all boils down to know thyself. That's why we say know thyself, to know the universe. That's an expression we use. Another expression we use is all answers lie within, or the universe is within you. That's the principle of correspondence, which is another natural law principle, that basically your inner world is kind of like a microcosmic reflection of what's going on around you. Or as Jim Rohn said it, if you want things to change, you've got to change. So yes, the Freedom Studio is largely about helping people empower themselves with the right knowledge so that they can make those necessary changes applicable to whatever's going on in their life, so that they can start to finally experience more joy, more freedom, more prosperity, more abundance, and ultimately more greatness.
And thank you so much for acknowledging that. Now, David, there might be other people also that are probably watching this and they might just really get excited, but are there any sort of red flags or signs that somebody shouldn't bother with this particular work? Like, if this obviously does sound like it's not for everybody, but would rather people are free to relegate themselves, how do you screen clients or maybe participants so that maybe your energy, your time, and your resources and your freedom is actually honored?
Yeah, that's a great question, Prosper. That's very timely because I had to deal with that today. That's about boundaries, setting good boundaries. Like today, someone jumped on a call with me, ostensibly to partner, and they were just their only objective was to control, to be, like to try to infiltrate. I know some people think that's kind of humorous, but there are agents and infiltrators who are always trying to infiltrate these movements and derail them. It's all psychology. So fortunately, because I'm very good at this stuff, I was able to, within the 30-minute meeting, figure out that they have kind of a hidden agenda. So we don't invite any special agents or infiltrators, lurkers, none of those people, trolls. But the other type of people that the larger group of people that we don't invite, of course, are people that just aren't willing to take responsibility for what's going on in their own life. Or that people who are looking for a quick fix, right? Anybody who's looking for a quick fix, we can't help you. Anybody who's looking for someone to do it for you, we can't really help you. I mean, we can do part of it, but you still need to have the foundational knowledge. We can't do the most important part. We can help you build a better structure. We can be there the whole way. We can have your back, but you've got to do the real work if you want that. So people who aren't willing to do the real work, who are just looking for quick fixes, instant gratification, easy wins, easy money, possibility, we're not going to be able to help any of those people until they change their mindset.
Absolutely. And for those that are keen and they feel like they are ready, as we established that when the student is ready, the teacher sort of appears. And if this video has been their teacher, where can they go to on the internet to get started, or maybe wet their feet and see if this is something for them?
Yeah, so I would recommend that people go to thefreedom.studio. That's our link that feeds into everything we do, thefreedom.studio. And then we have a couple of great ways to get involved. We do a free workshop every month, about once a month. I call it the Way of the Sovereign. I've been doing, free workshops about every month now for almost 2 years. It's been a great event. We have great participation. The workshops just keep getting better. But that's just a great way to come and spend a few hours with us and get really immersed into everything that we talk about at the Freedom Studio, and even, decide if it's even something you want to get involved in. And then we have, obviously, I have a YouTube channel. So if you go to the freedom.studio, we have links to all our social media like YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. We try to be on most of the major platforms. So I would just encourage people to go check out that link and either come to a workshop or, go deeper if you feel called to. I mean, we have a whole academy through our memberships. The memberships are pretty economical. So we have something for everyone to get started, but I would just take it a step at a time. See, dip your feet in the pool, and if the water feels good, go ahead and dive right in.
Absolutely. I'll make sure that all those links are in the show notes so that people can actually get started, on those parts and things of that nature. Now, this is just me thinking outside. A lot of people in the online space, especially coaches, consultants, they push the whole hustle, the whole ignore your health. And I think that almost was the catalyst to, what was creating your dependency on, what you were dependent on, or the sort of lifestyle and things of that nature. And I feel like you can't really scale your body or your soul if it's already breaking down. Now, how has all of these lessons that you have had in your experience now part of what you're helping other people be, do, and have?
Yeah, you absolutely cannot ignore your health. Health has to be primary. You must take care of yourself. If you expect to show up every day, operating at a high level, certainly, to the standard that I hold for myself, it's not going to work. It would never work if I wasn't taking good care of my health. So, taking good care of oneself, getting good sleep, being relatively healthy, eating healthy, and so forth, Absolute requirement. Absolute requirement. Now, it's not necessarily core of what we teach. We're not really nutrition and fitness or anything like that, but it always kind of fits into the whole picture. And I check in with people to see if they are taking good care of themselves. And if not, I kind of keep putting it back on them, even when we're dealing with other things. Like if I see a client keep showing up, tired or worn out, even though I'm not a health coach, or a healthcare protection practitioner, just from my own experience, I'm going to ask them questions, to get to the bottom of it. Are they running themselves ragged? So this whole idea of hustle and grind. I mean, yeah, there are times when you're going to work harder, but if you've got to take care of the basics. And actually, when you do prosper, then you have more energy and you can do more with the time that you have. You can get a lot more done in the same amount of time, so that you don't have to hustle and grind, because you're going to make better decisions. You're probably going to learn how to delegate faster. You're going to execute at a higher level. So you're going to get probably done in 4 hours what most people couldn't even get done in 40 hours.
Oh, absolutely. And I really believe you can't do well if you don't feel well, and it's just one of those things that if you're going to be going on this journey, you literally have to be working twice as hard to get half of what, you will be getting, because, the journey in and of itself has its own demands, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And as you have said, to a certain extent, spiritually. Now, David, I can't wait to see what people are going to do with this information, but you might have just maybe something that you were holding on to that you wanted to give us as a parting word, because when information like this hits people, it's probably a little bit too much, but if you can just give us something they could just go in and digest, sit with, so that they can actually start looking at their health, wealth, or relationships, or maybe start looking into doing or having a happier existence.
I would say follow your intuition. So a good way to explain that is if someone's listening to this and there was like one thing that we said today that really struck them and they were really inspired, I would encourage them, just go for it. Just take the next step. Come to a workshop. Just do the next thing. Because the way life works is we can only do the next thing that's in front of us. You're not going to ever be able to solve everything in one go. So I would say if you vibe with this and you want to check it out, go watch some videos, join the workshop. Just do whatever that next thing is, because doors are constantly opening. Don't overanalyze it. Don't think you have to have all the answers all at once. That would take, no one goes to a movie and says, damn, I'm so annoyed. Why don't they just skip to the end of the movie? Or, people don't pick up a book and say, I should just read the last chapter because I'm too impatient to go through the whole book. So I would say just slow down to speed up, slow down, just take the next step and enjoy it. So for the right individual, when they hear something that really vibes with them, just take that next step. That's all you got to do.
Absolutely. Now, David, what a journey, man. I mean, thank you so much for being candid, for being real and generous with your story. And I'm really hoping that the listeners were seeing themselves in parts of it. And also, it wasn't all about, the end. Like you said, it was actually the journey, the struggle, the fall, the rebuilding, and everything else along with it. I really appreciate you for taking your time to be on the Online Prosperity Show today.
Thanks, Prosper. I've enjoyed the conversation, and I thought it was fun that we were able to take it in different directions.
Absolutely. And for those that are watching right now, thank you so much for taking it this far. I know some of these topics are new, but that's how we learn, and that's how you discover new things. And if this episode actually resonated with you, I have one ask off of you. I just encourage you to share this episode with just one person who's struggling with either their health, their wealth, or their relationships, or they lack freedom, or they have financial anxiety, or just some existential problem they might be facing. Don't say a word. Let this story just meet somebody who actually needs it. And while you're at it, subscribe to the Online Prosperity Show so you don't miss out on exclusive insights like these. And I'll be putting in the show notes all the links for you to get in touch with David Greenberg. And I also encourage you to stay tuned, because in the next episode, we're going to be diving into ideas and practices that you can actually adopt right now in order for you to live more joyfully, to align with your daily life, and actually have a deeper vision that you can build, along the way. And I can't wait to see what it is that you're going to be doing with this information. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.